Hey all, DT Neil here talking to you about storytelling, genre, science fiction, fantasy, horror, and other things. I'm thinking a lot about cyberpunk because I've got the first of a trilogy. The first book, Sightseer, comes out next month under one of my pen names, in this case, Dean Vale. And, being immersed in that and being a fan of cyberpunk specifically and in general, it's gotten me philosophically musing about cyberpunkish things. And it's funny, this is going to sound like a really weird observation, but there are no good parents in cyberpunk. Like all authority figures, there's a squiffiness inherent in that. And the hustle culture of cyberpunk, where you have these various rebels and outcasts and misfits in society who have taken it upon themselves to use extraordinary means to augment themselves in order to work hustles, right? Take gigs. And it seems like an absurd comment to talk about the absence of good parents. But it's also funny because obviously the human condition, human society, whether somebody's a good parent or a bad parent, and we know from just the world around us that there are plenty of terrible parents. In cyberpunk, it's almost completely absent, that idea of like somebody coming from a family. They're just merely there, all augmented, strung out on drugs or whatever they're doing. They're all revved up, to go do a gig, or they're super badass, mysterious person. But in terms of the mechanics, that person came from somewhere. If they weren't grown in a vat and they're not an android, or a cyborg, and even a cyborg, you think, well, what led you to that place to have to do that? Now, I will give credit to Cyberpunk 2077, the Edge Runners anime, which was great fun, because they at least, with David, the lead character, they at least had his mom there briefly before she gets annihilated in some tragic gang-related activities. Sorry, spoiler. They did make a little nod to him coming from somewhere and having a parent who cared about him and wanted the best for him, which I think is a nice spin on the subgenre, because otherwise people just kind of come out of whole cloth. You don't think about where they come from. Now, on my own efforts with regard to Sightseer, I throw a couple little nods to the lead character and his past, what led him to make the steps that he took to enter into that criminal, hustling world. And then as I did that, I thought about it more, and I was like, wow, it really is funny, because people just, part of that is people just defining their own identities, finding them, creating them, and living them. We get one other nod with Rebecca and Pilar. I love Rebecca, great character. But the brother and sister, and that idea of a brother-sister duo, which when you look at them, you wouldn't even necessarily guess that. They're just so weird. But I love Rebecca. Pilar, not so much. He's gross. But it's just interesting because thinking of it because I'm always doing world building, so for me, I'm always thinking of the larger implications of choices within a world, especially in a science fiction or fantasy world. And one could look at that and say, well, how is this possibly sustainable? Because it's not. The architecture of a cyberpunk world, which is kind of terrifying because it's one of the more credible science fiction universes. There's the post-apocalyptic and there's the cyberpunk, and both of those are startlingly relevant to our here and now. The collapse of democratic government in the face of corporate autocracy, right? High technology serving the interests of the incredibly wealthy at the expense of everybody else. Seems on the mark, right? And but it also feels like a liminal state. It feels like something that's very transitory, because when you take your average, cyberpunk character, and you think about, well, where are they in 5 years? 9 times out of 10, they're dead, right? They've worked their hustle and they've kind of slipped off the grid somewhere, and they're living it up on their ill-gotten gains, in peace, ideally, and remoteness, and just vanishing. But what you don't ever think of is, at least I don't think of, oh, somebody's gonna, they're gonna have a family, they're gonna do this. For most of the people in that hustle culture world, whoever they're with, whoever's part of their team, that's basically their family. So you can have some proxy parent figures, and they did that again in Edge Runners. They did that for a while, but then nearly everybody dies. So there's that. And there's that that transitory idea and transactional idea of just living in the moment. Living in the moment, here and now, live fast, die young. Ideally for those folk, it's like, well, leave a legend behind. Become known for something in some fashion. And anyway, that's all I was just sort of reflecting on. I'm looking forward to this one coming out, to Sightseer coming out. I think it's good. I think it's a decent addition to the cyberpunk lexicon. The dystopian nature of it. It'll play very nicely. And the Plastic Fantastic trilogy that I have in mind, it's actually going to be an anthology series. So there will be a different character set for book 2 and for book 3, as I follow through my plan for the trilogy, which I think works for it. I think that's the right way to go. So there's that.